Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. I am here with 6 contributors to a book that is coming out. When is this coming out?
We're thinking
scheduled for March, unless they're late, but that never happened.
Sometime in 2023, called The Man Who Laughs, Exploring the Clown Prince of Crime, which is coming out from Crazy 8 Press. I am with the editors, Lou Tambone and Rich Handley. Bob Greenberger, one of the founders of Crazy 8 Press and also one of the contributors, Paul Kupperberg and Bob Greenberger, former DC writers, and also contributors to this particular anthology. And of course, Paul and LaMar, who are regulars on the Comics Cube. I'm going to ask, and I'm feel free to interrupt each other and feel free to kind of just jump in whenever, and you don't need to wait for me to ask anyone. But what makes, let's start with you, Lou. What makes the Joker so fascinating?
He's a delicious villain. Like you need that yin and yang, right? When you have those stories. Otherwise, stories about heroes are just kind of boring. They're walking around, with nothing to do, right? So I going back and doing a lot of the research, I came across some really fun stories, and his whole adventure of going from a homicidal guy to the comics code, stripping him down to a goofy dude, to the Batman show where he was still goofy, and then you get into your your five-way revenge, and they start to bring him back a little more, and a Killing Joke and stuff like that, and he just goes through this crazy journey. Just as crazy as Batman's, of course, right? So a villain like that, to me, it's great. I just love it. Plus, he's funny.
Rich?
I appreciate any character that makes me laugh. And this is a character who it's almost impossible not to laugh with, even when he's doing some pretty terrifying things. And I one of the things I like about the character is that it works in so many different approaches. You can make him terrifying, you can make him funny, you can make him charismatic. You could basically make him a TV host. You could do anything you wish with this character, and for some reason it would work. And there's not a lot of characters, I think, where you could do that with. I mean, sure, we've seen things like the Penguin running for mayor, and that sort of thing happens. But with the Joker, no matter what scenario you put him in, in the right writer's hands, it works. But there's always beneath that this terrifying fear that he's going to, then turn everybody in the room into a Jokerfish, and that to me is part of the fun of the character.
Way to call me out on that one line, Rich. So mine is going to be about the Jokerfish. So thanks, Rich, for reminding me that I haven't written mine.
The Joker really is a product of the era that the stories are set in, much like Batman, and they really have shown their elasticity. They've shown how adaptable they can be, different times, different places, different approaches. So it can be amusing, like the Dick Sprang era stuff in the 1950s. But he works his best when he's dangerous and deadly, as seen in the initial two stories from Batman #1 through Five-Way Revenge and the Jokerfish, and some of the more modern material. I think that's why he endures.
Yeah, I don't think the scary clown is not a new concept. Certainly, even before Joker, there was Conrad Veidt and the whole. He wasn't a clown, but still, scary clowns have been around for a while. But I think if you ask somebody to name a scary clown, you're most likely to hear the Joker before Pennyworth or anybody else, because that's a Johnny come lately, let's face it.
You said Pennyworth, you meant Pennywise.
Pennywise, yes. Yeah, I don't read Stephen King, so I'm Pennywise and pound foolish. So but anyway, so I think it's just because even as a I grew up on the Dick Sprang stuff, and the early Schwartz, although Julie didn't bring back the Joker for a while, did he? It was
Oh, no, it was in Detective 327.
27. Okay, right. Okay, right. All right, I'm still researching. I'm okay. But even as a kid, I think my first exposure to him may have been those Bantam paperbacks, of that stuff. And I remember one shot. It's a profile shot of the Joker kind of leaning, one of those Dick Sprang things where he's kind of leaning into the panel, in profile, menacingly. And it was like, ooh, at 7 or 8 years old, that just made me, like sit back. It was spooky, and this was the funny Dick Sprang Joker. So I think there's always that little bit of spark of, ooh, it's a clown, that really just that keeps him alive and allows for that versatility.
Funny thing about that, my first exposure to him was watching the Batman TV show. So my initial exposure to the Joker was that he had a mustache hidden underneath his makeup. I read the comics version later, and the second exposure I had was it Larry Storch? Yeah, Larry Storch's characterization. So my initial reaction to the Joker was somewhat different than those who came into him through the comics.
I gotta say, until somebody pointed out the mustache, I never noticed it.
Well, back when it was originally running, nobody noticed it because the old, the resolution on television, even in color in those days, was just, you weren't going to see it. It's only when
and the screens were small.
Right, right. And then when you see the remastered stuff, it pops right out. But back then it didn't matter because of the, they knew it wouldn't show on the screen.
I didn't bring it down with me, but actually the mask that I wore when COVID hit has always been a Joker mask from, the Batman TV show. And they actually did put little hairs under the white. So if you go on my Facebook, anybody go through my pictures, you see me wearing a Joker mask. You look right here, you'll see the little lines.
That's hilarious.
I said that I bought like 5 of them. I said, this is my only mask I'm ever going to wear.
LaMar, tell me why you love the Joker.
It's weird because like with the joke, like as a character, like there's a line that he toes where it's like he's funny, like you said, he's most effective when he's funny, but then it gets to a point where it's not funny. And you shouldn't be laughing, but you end up laughing anyway. And you could do that because hey, he's not a real person. These things are just absolutely absurd, right? So if it was on television, you wouldn't laugh at it, right? But it's just that that line that he toes, it's always been interesting to me, and it seems like we kind of take him for granted sometimes. I think because he's so ubiquitous, and even sometimes when you put him on the shelf for a few years, it's like, all right, man, can you bring him back out, please? Like this is getting ridiculous. We don't even like this new guy. Bring him back. You know what I mean? And it's just he like when you talk about like a villain who what they're about perfectly aligns with their visual presentation, like he's probably the first one that I would think about. It's just like I don't really like, for example, like the Grundy Joker. Like some people tend to like that one, but I don't really like it all that much. I want the clowntastic dude, right? Because that's what he's most effective, I think.
The Clown Prince of Crime.
Yeah.
Paul, finish off this question.
The aspect of the Joker I think that speaks the most to me is that sort of intense desire to be noticed, particularly by the Batman, but to be acknowledged and to be noticed by everyone, and I think that comes across in most versions of the Joker, and it's true to a certain extent with every Batman villain, but there's a sort of desperation to the Joker that he wants to be the first thing the Batman thinks about when he wakes up in the morning, and obviously, that's very intense and scary, but I think a bit of that appeals, kind of touches on something in everyone, that desire to be noticed and acknowledged and to be in someone's mind.
I'm going to ask,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Rich.
I was just going to say, with that in mind, I'm curious how you all feel about Tim Burton's take on the idea that, I mean, it's not just Tim Burton's, but they play on this in the film, that the Batman and the Joker are largely the same guy, but that there's a fine line between what they do.
No. Say good night, Gracie. No. We are not two sides of the same coin. No.
That's why I wanted to see your reaction to it, because the idea that, you created me.
Well, Batman has actually become the other side of the Joker coin. But back then he wasn't. Back the Batman today is a violent, nasty character that I have no feeling and no affinity for whatsoever. But back then it was not true.
So the
But
Batman
what I
has
like
changed.
about the Joker,
Go ahead, Paul.
But I say something I really like about a lot of versions of the Joker is that he would like to think that he is the other side of the coin to Batman, even though it's true. He would like Batman to believe that. So that's how I often quite like to read it when they go for that angle, is that, the Joker is trying to convince Batman and himself that that is true, even if it isn't.
Do you think that Burton's film, making that a sort of a popular idea, led to what Paul Kay is describing, how it degenerated? Do you think there's a direct line there?
No.
I think it's just, I think that if you look at all media, entertainment media in general, it's all been on this, progressive rise, towards more and more violent.
That is
so
true.
I don't think there was, there's any specific point, to that in Batman now.
And I was particularly put out when Burton had the killer of Thomas and Martha Wayne as the man who became the Joker. That was a Hollywood convention that has never sat well.
And it's also infected. It's also infected every superhero movie since, where the bad guy has to have an origin connected to the hero. You saw that in Spider-Man and movies after that. Suddenly, the hero has to be connected to the villain in some way. They seem to think that's, deep and dark and dramatic. But it's Hollywood.
I'm going to ask this mainly for Paul Kupperberg and Bob Greenberger, because I'm fascinated by the fact that when I read a lot of things like Denny O'Neill's writing for comics or other writing guides, there's a lot of talk about how you have to flesh out the villain. The villain's motivations have to be perfectly clear. We have to know where the villain's coming from. We kind of have to sympathize with the villain. All of that in order to be able to identify with the villain. The villain has to outclass the hero, either one way or the other. Somehow, all of those things don't seem to hold true for the Joker. And arguably, he is the most famous supervillain on the face of the planet. So why is he such an anomaly? Because he doesn't outclass Batman physically. He doesn't really outclass him mentally. He's best, I believe, when you don't really know anything about him. And so why
I can challenge he and Batman are on different mental levels, where Batman is very controlled and planned and, incredibly well prepared. But there's a randomness to the Joker's actions that Batman cannot prepare for and plan. And therefore that gives the Joker an edge, because he can plan the most outrageous, unexpected, death trap or problem. And Batman can't prepare for it. And that adds a level of, the unexpected.
That's true.
Yeah, there's that. I just, again, it's all, the villain, you don't have, first of all, the villain does not have to be cooler and classier and whatever than the hero, because he's not. A villain is a villain. Villains don't think of themselves as villains. I mean, that's the big thing that always bugs me is, I'm evil and going to take over the world and rob banks. What? Is that's your motive? Okay, enjoy that. But I mean, they need motives, of course, and they need to be as credible as, this stuff can be in this type of fiction. But, they're not. You want to make an interesting, intriguing villain, But in the end, you're just going to have to rip him to shreds and show that he's a lousy, stinking villain. So, you know, it doesn't matter how cool Dr. No comes across. He's still a piece of shit.
You know, part of the emphasis on villains is because the hero is in the comic book every month.
Yeah.
Or in Batman's case, 8 books a month, if not more. Therefore, his opponents, each issue has to be engaging to the readership to see, all right, how's Batman going to handle this time? Because we're already invested in Batman. So he needs a constant stream of challenges to keep the comic interesting and commercially viable.
Yeah.
Anyone else have thoughts on that subject matter?
Yeah, I think like there's this sort of trend now to sort of putting the villains, especially with DC, maybe putting the villains before heroes almost. You know, like the biggest film they've got coming up is Black Adam. You know, they've made a Joker film without Batman.
That's not a Joker film.
What's that say?
Not a Joker film.
Well, no, I completely agree with you. Yeah, because you don't have it's just a guy in makeup without Batman. You need the Batman to make it the Joker. Or I was talking about that desire to be noticed. He needs to be noticed by someone, you know, and that's got to be Batman, or it's not the Joker. So I don't know. I forgot where I was going with that. Sorry.
I think actually Conan Doyle ruined it for the rest of us with Moriarty. You know, Moriarty is that very villain you were talking about. You were describing that superior, you know, actually is smarter than the hero. And even that is, you know, that's cool because he's smarter than me, but he, you know, I can still defeat him. I will still be triumphant in the end, you know, that's cool. But, you know, again, it's not all, you know, I'm losing myself. Yeah, I don't think the villains are, you know, and again, maybe it's just age and perspective, but you know, the evil stuff, it's like, that's a cool villain. Yeah, but like I said, he's still a villain and there's nothing to admire here. You know, you're in the end, you're rooting for this guy, you know, what's his name in the Bruce Willis movie with the tall building.
Die Hard.
Yeah, John
Die
McClane.
Hard, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
great villain, but really you're just waiting to see him go over the side and plummet to his death.
You know, and I think that ties into a lot of what you were talking about, Paul, about the rise of violence in media.
Mhm.
You know, when you're watching a show, not to go off on a tangent, sorry, but a show like The Sopranos or Breaking Bad, and you're into Walter White and you're into Tony Soprano, but you have to actually stop and remind yourself that these people are not nice. They're not good people. Why do I like these people? Why do I want to watch them? I remember reading something about the writing of The Sopranos. It was David, what's his name? Chase, I think. He was talking about how he would have to put in scenes where Tony Soprano did really awful things just to remind the viewers that this is not a good person. Like, you shouldn't be liking, you know. So I'm sorry if that goes off.
No, it doesn't. It's right on point. I mean, you know, it's like I watched the first season of The Boys.
Yes.
And you know, I had read the comic, but you quickly realize that the heroes are no better than the villains. And that's why I'm not watching the second, because, you know, I don't need to see it's splatter. It's splatter porn. You know, this stuff has become splatter porn. They just want to see blood spurting and buildings falling down and destruction. You know, fine, there's a story around it, but you know, this is what they need to make that story stand out and be shocking. Otherwise, it's just another, you know, evil corporation and you know, versus heroes. So, you know,
I had the same problem with
as
The
you can
Boys.
tell,
I
I've
got to
grown
have-
skeptical with age. What?
Sorry, I said I had the same problem with The Boys. I was reading all of it in preparation to watch the show, and I got about halfway through and I said, there's just every person in this story is despicable. There's nobody really that I can root for. And and I'm enjoying the characters, but I'm not, there's nobody here that I go, well, I hope that person's alive at the end. And there comes a point where like it starts chipping away at your soul, because you find yourself going, I like this character and I like this character. Like, what the hell am I saying? These are douchebags, you know? So yeah.
And you know, it's even gone into like sitcoms. You know, sitcoms used to be about families and friends who were friends. And now they're about friends who fuck each other over at every chance they get. You know, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is kind of like, you know, the extreme, but nobody, you know, most sitcoms, you know, turned certainly during the 90s and stuff, you know, even Seinfeld, these are not nice people. I would not want to have been friends with any of these people.
Yeah.
You know, so it's the whole shift in entertainment is turned towards nasty, you know. Big Bang Theory, everybody's always hosing each other. You know, the friends are just like they enjoy watching each other suffer. Not to say I don't have friends to whom that's true, but most people, not you, Bobby, I swear. But you know, it's just enough already. You know, let's see something, you know, pleasant. But you know, again, there's pleasant stuff out there, but it's just such an extreme. And I think it just makes it ordinary and banal. And you don't want that stuff to be banal in people's minds. You don't want them to think about, you know, oh, look at that blood splattering, you know, that's cool, because we've really got enough real blood splattering all over the world that, you know, to glorify this stuff is pretty irresponsible. Says the guy who wrote The Peacemaker.
But you don't know, right? You don't know how something that you wrote is going to evolve.
And you know, back in the 80s when I did that, it was kind of the tone. You know, I was oh, grim and gritty. Okay, that's if I need to do grim and gritty to sell a comic book, that's what I'll do. But you know, at some point, you hope the trend changes, but so far not so much.
And let's stick with you for that, Mr. Kupperberg, because your essay in this book is about both Joker's five-way revenge, which Lou is advertising on his t-shirt right there. How it leads to the Killing Joke, which I understand you have very strong feelings about. How would you like to talk about your essay here?
I hate the Killing Joke. I think it's a nasty piece of work that does such disservice to Batman. You know, and it waits right until the last page to screw Batman over. You know, so and it was dark and ugly. It was nasty. I mean, the art was beautiful. You know, but man, I don't see the point of that story. It's misogynistic and hateful. It's just terrible.
Yeah, my essay is all about the Killing Joke, you know, how Alan Moore, A, repudiated it, looking back on it, and B, how the Alan Moore origin speculation has become almost universally accepted, ruining the Joker, right up till that movie that's called Joker that's not about the Joker. But, you know, it's like, all right, one version of the story was he was this failed comedian who got, you know, somehow coerced into the Red Hood gang. That's not what Bill Finger wrote. The guy was a criminal in a Red Hood that was never explained. The Joker's origins as a mystery are actually kind of interesting because we know Batman's origins so well. Joker is this force of nature, and we shouldn't understand it entirely.
It's like when they did those Phantom Stranger origins. You know, you don't need to know the Phantom Stranger's origin. That's why he's the Phantom Stranger. You know, he's not the Phantom Phil. So, you know,
I would read a comic called The Phantom Phil.
I was about to say.
I would write a comic called The Phantom Phil.
All right, we gotta start up a Kickstarter now.
Bill the Phantom, Bob the Phantom. Bob Phantom was an
Archie
MLJ book in the 40s, yeah. But yeah, it's just it's just not necessary. There are some things, but see, that's the problem with comics, with fans like us who got into the business and was writing this stuff. We saw these little holes, we saw these little inconsistencies, and in our heads, because we're no longer writing these things for 8 to 13-year-olds like the stuff we read was aimed at. We're writing it for 40-year-olds. So we're looking, and we're also looking at it through 40-year-old eyes. So we're seeing these little inconsistencies and going, well, maybe we should explain that. You don't need to. You don't need to fill every single hole. Roy Thomas should have sat down and relaxed. It's just not that important. In fact, it turns the whole thing into now it's homework. This is, I have to learn all these complicated things, and it's all done just so one guy can scratch an itch. So.
Is it inevitable though? I mean, when a character's been around for 80, 90 years, isn't it likely that at some point somebody is going to establish an origin? Because I totally agree with what you're saying. I just wonder if it's likely that would not have evolved even with a different writer.
It may have, and it's one thing to kind of label these things speculation, but then you get, then you go the next generation in, and it's like, well, nowadays, all Elseworlds and speculations and all fantasy stories, all imaginary stories are now real somewhere. Ergo, that's the Joker's origin. Because why couldn't it be real on this earth as opposed to any of the other ones? So
then you get
you
get something like that absurd 3 Jokers project where there's supposed to be 3 different versions of the Joker running around the DC universe. It's just 3 different interpretations of the same guy. I mean, what?
Right.
That was such a non-event book that I don't know about you guys, but I don't think it worked.
The art.
Now you know why I had to change my topic, because I that was actually going to be the source of my essay, and the more I researched, the more I realized my thesis doesn't hold up because that turned out to be such a non-event. So yeah, that's actually what held up a lot, was me going, I got nothing.
So, Rich and Lou, I'm gonna ask you guys, what prompted this book?
Well, Rich and I worked together on many books, and we were sort of I don't want to say in a lull, but it was like, okay, what's the next project? And we threw some ideas around, and I said, well, what about the Joker? I mean, I'm always drawn to him somehow, no pun intended. But I tend to throw around lines, and I have a musical act. We call ourselves the 2 Jokers. It's like kind of like this thing that's always been floating around. I collect little Joker memorabilia sometimes if I see it. And I said, well, why don't we maybe do something about the Joker? And then there were a few other ideas, but this one seemed to bubble to the top. And I think Rich, that was the one you were most enthusiastic about. And then, comes the who do we get and how do we do it talk. But that's sort of what prompted it. It was just, what's the next book? It wasn't anything else crazy.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
More secret origin.
Here I am looking at Rich if he has anything to add, and he's like, that's it.
Like, nah.
That was exactly what happened. He said, you want to do this? And I went,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to make up a story? Go ahead, Rich. Make up a funny story.
I'm going to call out a name, and I hope whoever name I call out, please tell me what you're writing about. So, LaMar, let's start with you. What is the essay that you're writing for in this book?
I put together a short comparison between Joker, the trickster character, and I picked 3 separate characters from just different African folklore, and I compared and contrasted them, like what's the same versus what's different. So it's also a bit of an examination of like Western world ideas versus like African world ideas, and how they're similar and how they're different. And most of it is just like a lot of it really is drawing a hard line, and when you read it, you'll see why I did that, because there's a real world reason why I had to say, okay, these things are similar, but this stuff is way different, right? And it's like a real world thing, but you'll see when you read it why I did it that way.
Okay.
That idea intrigued us, by the way, as soon as you sent it to us.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I hope it turned out all right, you know.
I
I'm
know.
sure it's great.
So for context for everyone, Rich and Lou messaged both me and LaMar in a group chat, and the moment LaMar said his pitch, I was like, I'm not joining. I don't have an idea.
Well, we didn't want a book that was just a bunch of people going, oh, we love the Joker and here's what we
Right.
love about him. We wanted different, takes, and that was just like the perfect example of something a little bit left of center. That was, a topic that we might not have thought of if we put out a list of topics and say, here, write about these things. I'd rather have people submit a topic like that. It makes the book 1,000 times more interesting, I think.
It's one of the big dangers with doing any kind of an anthology is that the majority of people are going to want to write about the most popular things. So a few years back, Jim Beard and I did a Planet of the Apes fiction anthology, and both Bob and Paul contributed to this. And one of the first things we made a point of saying when we invited people was, submit more than one idea, because at least half of you are going to say you want to write about Zira and Cornelius. And we don't want the book to be the adventures of Zira and Cornelius. There's got to be a couple of Zira and Cornelius stories, but it's obvious that everybody's going to say, I want to write about Zira, or I want to write about Taylor. So, there needs to be some outside the box ideas. When you're doing a book about the Joker, you're going to get a lot of people saying, I want to write about Cesar Romero. I want to write about Mark Hamill. And so there needs to be more of a variation. So LaMar's is an example of one where we went, oh yeah, that's going to be good, because that's going to help the book be something unexpected.
Yes.
I'm looking at the list of topics. Is anyone writing about Jared Leto? No? Okay.
I was expecting a lot of pitches about the movies, and we really didn't get any. I don't think. Maybe
Very little
here or there, but I thought people were going to go right to the Jack Nicholson, right to the whatever else, and Heath Ledger. I thought not a lot of talk about any of that. So we're
reached out to comic book fans.
Yeah. So
exactly.
I don't think a lot of the movie stuff bled into the comic. A lot of the movie stuff bled into the comics. So
and frankly, as brilliant as Heath Ledger's performance is, it's still a guy in clown makeup, not a guy who went through this physical transformation.
Yeah.
So he's closer to the comic than certainly Joaquin Phoenix, but just was disconnected.
I would say
I suspect
I like the Joker. I actually like the Joker, the movie. I agree. It's not an actual, it's not a Joker movie. It's more like a guy who lives in the universe where the Joker really exists, and he uses that. He takes on that identity and does what he does. He puts on the makeup. But if I don't have that kind of in the back of my head, then it's a good movie.
Well, am I right in remembering that this movie started out as a non-Batman related film? Like, this was a movie about a killer clown, and then they said, make it about the Joker. Am I correct about that? Yeah. So what you're saying absolutely makes sense, since it was not written to be about the Joker.
And Paul really likes it because it's a rehash of King of Comedy, which starred his idol Jerry Lewis. So
you mock, but
Paul
I like it, though. I agree with you that it's a very strange interpretation of the Joker.
Yeah.
But
and there's room for that too. If you want to be, if you want to, there's been 72 interpretations of Robin Hood. Why not 72 interpretations of the Joker?
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
My reaction to it was like, this movie is well executed, and Joaquin Phoenix delivers an amazing performance. I just don't understand why it exists at this particular moment in time.
I think it was an experiment. I think it was a chance. The studio had seen where the movies were going, and they were unhappy with so much of it. I think they were just trying. I think the Joker and even the Batman to a certain extent were kind of a way to see. Can we do these things differently? and maybe, you know, recapture an audience.
Yeah, okay. I think my biggest gripe about it wasn't anything to do with the movie. It had a lot to do with how it was received, and like how a lot of people saw it and thought it was like the deepest thing ever. And that's
You
it.
know, change their mind with the
But
sequel.
these are people who read comic books and nothing else.
Paul Cornish, what is your topic about? Because I actually don't know.
Oh, my topic was the 2000 story Emperor Joker, Reign of the Emperor Joker, because I really like that story because it's really daft, and it's a story about Mr. Mix's Pitlick gives the Joker 99.9% of his power for some reason, and you know, if you want to know somebody's motivations, then you give him the power to do anything he wants, you know? So I think it's quite a revealing story about the Joker. And as I was writing it, I sort of found myself going to other Joker stories in, like, you know, film and computer games and other comics, and finding things that Emperor Joker told me about his personality reflected in these other stories too, to sort of back it up. And I actually wound up talking about the Joker film then, because spoilers for Emperor Joker here. Emperor Joker, towards the end, the way Superman beats him is that he challenges the Joker, who can do anything he wants at this point. He's only limited by the power of his imagination. So Superman challenges the Joker to imagine a universe without the Batman, and he can't do it. And this allows Mr. Mix's Pitlick to get his power back. But then it strikes me that the Joker, the film, is about the Joker existing in a universe without Batman. So we have actually created something that was too horrible for the actual Joker to imagine. So, so that struck me as really interesting. So that's the sort of angle I ended up going with it. Yeah.
I
Very cool.
do enjoy the fact that Paul here is a very huge Superman fan. All three of us are. But I would go on a limb and say Paul is the biggest one of the three of us. And I do enjoy the fact that in this Joker anthology, you somehow found a way to make it about Superman.
Okay.
That's okay, because my new essay topic is going to make the book about Hellblazer. So we write about what we know, you know. So yeah.
Of course. You're fired. You're fired, Rich. You're fired.
There we go. You'll be rehired.
I had to set Lou up on that. So
Yeah.
Bob, what are you writing about? You're writing about The Killing Joke.
Well, as I said, I'm writing about The Killing Joke and its unfortunate influence on all interpretations of the Joker in its wake. How many times people keep hearkening back to that particular origin, which is diminishing the Joker's power as this force of chaos if you know him that well.
That is also where I think the turning point was for the Clown Prince of
You know,
Crime.
one of the things I talk about in the essay is it was a standalone one shot off to the side when it was written in 1984. But by the time Denny and Neil became the Batman editor and the book was finally getting closer to completion, they started actually talking about integrating the crippling of Barbara Gordon into the continuity, which would then make the Killing Joke a canonical story, which was never the intent. And I think it was a mistake.
Yeah.
And I love how it was a 48-page graphic novel.
That's how they were back then. That was the standard.
Yeah. Paul Kupperberg.
Yeah, well, my piece is about the road to the Killing Joke. It looks at the Joker from the Joker's five-way revenge story in Batman, and how that kind of started his changeover into what we ultimately get to in the Killing Joke, which, as I stated before, I really hate.
You also see, so which of those two would you say is the real turning point for the Joker, the point of no return?
Oh, the point of no return is Killing Joke. Yeah.
But it was a long road to get there. It wasn't.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
It was, what was that? Like, geez, it was over a decade. It was like, 10, 12 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Five-Way Revenge, you got to remember, it was Batman 251. Neil started that story a long time earlier when Denny and Julie Schwartz and Neil were taking Batman back to the roots.
Right.
I mean, this story should have probably seen print 2 years earlier, except Neil was being Neil.
I find this fascinating because we have that long road from the Five-Way Revenge all the way to The Killing Joke. Where does Frank Miller's rendition of the Joker stand in all of this?
Out in the rain. Gloomy and dark.
Yeah, dang.
Again, when that came out in 1986,
Yeah.
it was off in the distance, and it was Frank's interpretation of a 50-year-old Batman and a 50-whatever-year-old Joker. And it was interesting, and all the interpretations were interesting, but everybody knew it was out there somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good segue to what I'm writing about, which is in the middle of Five-Way Revenge and The Killing Joke, which I consider I don't know if it's a definitive Joker story, but I feel like it's the one that defines the Joker for me, which is The Laughing Fish by Steve Englehart and Marshall Rogers. Because to me, as I said before, the Joker is best when he's random and you don't really know anything about him. And so the thing that I've always thought of was that if you look at the earliest interpretations of the Joker, where he's killing people and there's really no rhyme or reason to it, that shows his viciousness. And with all due respect to people like Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, or Frank Miller, I feel like things like The Killing Joke is something that a teenager probably might be able to come up with. Wouldn't it be great if the Joker did this?
It'd be so cool.
It'd be so cool. But the idea of putting his face on fish to trademark the fish and then getting mad at the trademark office for not being able to trademark the fish and then killing the people in the trademark office because they can't trademark the fish. There's an element here of what the hell is this? That I feel the Joker should be defined by, if not, it's not really a case where he is defined by it, because not all Joker stories are like that. But I feel like this is something that he should be defined by.
Right.
So,
like, what the hell is this guy going to do next?
Like, what is this? Like, how did you, as a writer, even come up with this? So that is why I'm writing about The Laughing Fish.
I mean, Englehart's story is a great, I guess, midway point, from Five-Way Revenge to what came after, but it really honors probably the 1940s version of the Joker, who was deadly as he appeared there, but maniacal and crazy before he got cartoony in the 50s.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, it also pays homage to the 50s, because it's like, if I say that out loud, it sounds like something that would come out in the 50s. But no, it's like, it's this really vicious thing. So that's why I love the Joker Fish. More, also just, that's such a short run.
Yeah,
and
Marshall's art, the Joker coming out of the shadows, just a great sequence.
Yeah. Also, in the animated series, they tied it in with Five-Way Revenge, because they used the ending of Five-Way Revenge for it. Turns out the ending of Five-Way Revenge has a shark, which is a smiling fish.
And Steve Mitchell running through the sewers.
Explain that.
The character Bigger Melvin that Batman chases at the beginning of the story, and the guy goes through the sewers. He goes everywhere to escape, and he comes up from the sewer and he puts back the cover, and there's Batman standing there waiting for him. And but the character was the image of the character was based on inker Steve Mitchell, who was worked in Neil's studio at Continuity.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And had and was at some point a crusty bunker. So,
Lou, what is yours is about? What?
Oh, I'm writing about the 70s, the goofy solo run. I don't know if you can see this with the background
Yeah.
killing it, but this was the 1970s solo run. Which I'm assuming, I tried to find this out for sure, but I'm assuming is the first time a villain was given their own comic book. So I'm hoping that's
At
true.
DC, didn't somebody do that before? Bob?
I tried looking it up. I don't know.
Well, I mean, there was the one-shot Marvel superheroes featuring Doctor Doom, and then his feature in Astonishing Tales seeded the Joker comic. But before that,
Depending on how you see the Submariner.
he's an anti-hero, so
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. I actually that 7th issue, that 11th issue. I still haven't got a copy of that, although my name's in it.
Actually, wait,
The 10th one, you mean
the unpublished one.
the Justice
number
League?
10.
Yeah. Oh, number 10. I thought it was number 11. That's right.
Just the Justice League one. I have it in another book. I don't have it. It's not in this book. I have it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I got it. The Yellow Claw.
The Yellow Claw. There you
Yellow
go.
Yeah.
Claw, yeah.
Stan Lee, Joe Manili, ran
Yep.
5 issues in about 56, 57. That was probably the first time there was a villain leading a comic.
All right, I'm gonna have to make a note of that. Thank you very much for helping me with my essay.
Lou, what is it about that series?
I had never really read it, and for me, I'm like Rich. My first experiences with the Joker were all like that 70s. The 60s show was on reruns, of course. You used to see that all the time, but like every time I saw him, he looked like, I don't know if you can say it, but he looked like this. You know, he was just like this goofy guy with the long jaw and just, and kind of like this here. And that just appealed to me when I found out he had his own books, which I didn't know. I went and got this and read it all, and I just love it. I think it's lighthearted. It's fun. I mean, it's not, the ideal, I guess. But I was able to talk to Elliot Magan a little bit, and I got some quotes from him, and it's going to be a lighthearted piece just about how I think maybe with newer eyes, it gets a little bit more love. Whereas back then, I don't think it did. I was a kid when it was out, and I didn't know it was there. So I can't.
I think that was I think that was more of a victim of the whole implosion than anything else, because that was around that time. Yeah, wasn't that one of the
75, 76?
Yeah,
Just before the implosion.
It was before the implosion. Okay.
I think it was just a tough book to sustain creatively. You notice how there were so many writers and artists working on it, and and he was constantly putting in guest star superheroes, to spark interest. My best guess is that when the villain has to lose at the end of every issue because of the comics code, the hamstrung.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know Marty Pasco took it over for the last issue or two. And that unpublished one, I was actually worked with Marty on the plotting and writing of that. It was like one of my first. I was kind of sitting at it was a mentoring kind of thing, more than anything else. Even though Marty and I were the same age, he entered the business about 5 years ahead of me as a writer. He was just a really good writer.
So can I mention that? You helped out? Can I quote you on that?
Yes, absolutely. I've got a credit. I've got a special thanks or whatever in the.
It has your name in it.
Yeah, but it was a tough sell, but it was very much of its time, I think. Which may be why some people are willing to look back at it with kind of through the softer lens of nostalgia and go, well, that was just that goofy Schwartz era of comic books.
I have a soft spot for that series because the issue with the Royal Flush Gang is one of my first comics.
Oh, really? Wow, that's cool.
I just wrote about the Royal Flush Gang in JLA for that number 43, was it, first appearance, and for a column on 13th Dimension. So it's a great goofy story.
Where is it?
That's the one. I saw that. Yeah, that's the one.
There it is. Like background's killing it, but there you go.
The idea of putting the Joker with the Royal Flush Gang is just such a an obvious idea.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's all angry because like how dare they model themselves after playing cards like I did, you know. His ego is a whole theme throughout everything, I
And then
guess.
he body shamed Amos Fortune for wearing a bodysuit.
You know, it's funny between the laughing fish and that story. The Joker is becoming a bit litigious, isn't he?
Yeah.
How do we reconcile two things that have been mentioned today, which is that that we shouldn't glorify villains, but at the same time, if we are going to have a series with a villain in it and he's losing every issue, it's really hard. Like, does that mean we just shouldn't have a series that's headlined by a villain, or is there a way to make it work, or what?
Well, today you can make it work, certainly.
Yeah.
You know, Marvel recently did another Doctor Doom series that was kind of interesting. You could do that today. You couldn't back then, again, because of the Comics Code. And I don't know if the audience appetite was there for villains.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I just, you know, we do love a good villain, you know, Darth Vader and the Joker and you know, Darkseid, Jesus, Darkseid, you know, the evilest thing in the universe, and he's great. He's a wonderful character, but you know, he does always have to lose, and he may be cool for the moment, but you know, it's just but again, I think the audience has changed so much that you could get away with making him the kind of hero. You know, there are ways to do it, I suppose. I mean, I can think of a couple or three stories offhand where you can actually have the bad guy being a winner without, you know, actually having to you know, stop being evil for a moment. But you know, it's not sustainable, I think.
Not for an
You
ongoing.
had mentioned Darth Vader, and I was thinking that, you know, it is possible to do a story where the bad guy wins without you rooting for the bad guy. And the two that came to mind, one was The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, obviously, the Return of the Jedi undoes it, but at the end of The Empire Strikes Back, the bad guys have won. You're still not rooting for Darth Vader, but the bad guys have won at the end of that film. And the other is Watchmen. And so it is possible. You're not happy Ozymandias did what he did, but here you have two stories in which the bad guy effectively wins at the end, but you're still not rooting for them. So I think that if you're going to do you could do a story, a series like the Joker. You wouldn't, without the Comics Code authority, you wouldn't have to have him lose every single issue. But I think it could still be done with the right writer, without him having to either lose every issue or you rooting for him.
All right, you're hired back, Rich. You're hired.
That's just because you don't want to edit the book solo. So,
Rich, your original idea was to use the three Jokers as a template to determine which of the three Joker types, the criminal, the clown, and the comedian, applied to each actor who has played the character on the screen. You have since abandoned this, but how far did you get with it?
I got through reading the three Jokers. That's how far I got with it, because I wanted, the idea was that I was going to take, okay, back it up because I'm stepping over my own words here. You'd previously mentioned we didn't have a lot of movie coverage in this. And so after we got the pitches, I said, I want to come up with something that would encompass all of the various on-screen versions of the Joker. And so I said, how about I take a look at the three Jokers and figure out which of these three templates these characters apply to. And as I sat through reading it, I went, there's just not as much substance here as I would like for it to make this essay interesting. And so, yeah, I eventually had to come with the to the conclusion that this was just not going to work. It didn't apply as well as I thought. And so I took some time to think about it. In the meantime, I was working on another book that I've been working on for a long time, and about Swamp Thing and Hellblazer. And I got to Brian Azzarello's run on Hellblazer. And it's kind of a controversial run. For one thing, instead of it being in Britain, the entire story is about John Constantine running around in redneck rural America. So it's a different setting with an American writer. And the other thing is that Constantine is sometimes out of character. He's arguably a psychopath in several issues, talks a man into suicide and so forth. And as I started reading it, I remembered, it's interesting. The villain in this story is named Stanley W. Manor, S.W. Manor, Stately Wayne Manor. The whole story is a Batman analog if Batman was the villain. And that I always recognized, but what I didn't recognize until this time rereading it is, holy crap, John Constantine's the Joker. And that's the reason that his atypical behavior pervades throughout Brian Azzarello's run. He's always drawn with this evil, maniacal, leering grin. His face is drawn like Lou's shirt. And I thought, all right, how did I not see this? So S.W. Manor has a ward named Tim and an ex-employee named Jason who was murdered. And he's got a butler named Fredo. And I thought, oh my God, this really is, not only is this evil Batman, but like there's a Joker analog who is going through this and he's the hero. So the hero is the Joker and Batman is the villain. And I thought, okay, I can do something with this. And so I as we were having the earlier discussions about the idea of rooting for the good guy, I was kind of waiting for Duy to get to me because Brian Azzarello's run does exactly that, the Joker as the good guy. And I think that it was just under the surface enough that a lot of readers weren't picking up on it, including me. I mean, the S.W. Manor, yeah, that was obvious, but Constantine is the Joker, I didn't think click. And that might be why that run divided fans. So that's what the premise then is. An entire, year and a half worth, or more than that, couple years worth of Hellblazer, where the Joker is the good guy and Batman is the bad guy.
Interesting.
Good
I
stuff.
never knew about that. Do you two want to talk about, you don't have to go through the whole list, but other notable essays that are coming in for this anthology?
I've got the list right here.
Oh, good. Because I don't.
Yeah. So Jim Beard is doing a character sketch of Cesar Romero's Joker. Let's see. What else is noted? So we got essays by Joseph Berenato. He and Jim Beard had done a Batman Bible for oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. 18 miles. Yeah. So Gotham City, 18 miles for Sequel Art. We've got Brian Cronin. Now the funny thing is, I don't remember there's two topics he had pitched. Lou, do you remember which one it was? Because one was about Denny O'Neil and the other one was about the Batman Joker dynamic in the 80s and 90s. And I haven't read his essay. I don't remember which one it is. I look like an idiot right now.
Yeah, I don't. I don't know. Let me take a peek in Dropbox while you go through the
We're
rest.
very on top of things, guys. I promise.
Fear
Joker,
not.
who's
We
the
are in
Joker?
control.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got stories from Joe Duffy and Alex Gaylor, a guy named LaMar. Michael Jan Friedman is analyzing the Joker's first appearance. Let's see. Glenn Hauman is writing about whether or not the Joker
tells all the jokes.
What's that? Sorry?
Where Batman is the one who tells all the jokes, the Joker's first appearance.
Yeah, that's what yeah, exactly. And Glenn Hauman is writing about whether or not Joker is actually an insane agent of chaos, or is he a sane man in a mad world, which sounds really intriguing. Tom Mason, who you'd mentioned was going to be here, but it's an account of the creation of the Joker as told by Bob Kane, Jerry Robinson, and Bill Finger in a series of What If They Existed text messages, which I think is pretty damn funny. So yeah, that was up there on the list of out of the box type of pitches.
Yeah.
Let's see.
That sounds
don't
fun.
remember. I think Keith DeCandido's in it, but I think on my list here, I think we were still in flux what the topic was.
Yeah. He jumped
John
in.
Trumbull. What's that?
He came in at the end. We added him recently. Cronin, by the way, was Cronin was the one you were looking for?
Yeah, because he and John Trumbull had both pitched two, and I didn't. I don't know in which one we ended up accepting.
So his is called Missing the Joker, or the joke, Missing the Joke. with the R in parentheses. I don't know which one that matches up to with your list though.
Yeah. So there,
Sorry
I guess
about
we'll
that.
find out soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that. There were topics that Lou came up with that we would have liked to have seen that we don't have in there, but maybe a second volume, who knows? But my hope is that things like the various film and TV adaptations or the various eras of the comics that we haven't specified. My hope is that some of this will come up when people turn in their essays, because one of the things I've seen, I've done about 10 or 12 essay anthologies for Sequart, similar types of projects, and a lot of times we'll have 12 different topics people pitch, but really by the time everyone turns their essays in, there's a whole lot more that's explored because people draw comparisons. So I'm kind of hoping that by the time we read everything, a lot more will have been covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Lou, anything to add? Or
no, he's right. That always happens, and that's part of the fun of it, is that you think you're getting an essay on this, and you do get an essay on this, but you also get 4 or 5 other things covered within it. And we don't need complete coverage of the whole world, but
Right.
sometimes
that'd be impossible. It's almost a century. So
yeah, it's too much. We used to be like that. We remember Rich was doing like Galactica and stuff. We used to really try to cover every aspect of every, and then you put the book out and it's like, hey, there's a new Galactica show, and you're like, oh,
that's the problem.
Like, forget
There's
it.
also the fact that the Galactica
impossible.
book we put out would actually kill somebody if you threw it out.
It's a
Oh,
break.
that's a
way
heavy
too big.
I really like that book. Anyway,
Mhm.
yeah. So I agree with Rich. We end up covering a lot more ground than we would just sticking to the topics, and that's great. I love it.
The Man Who Laughs, Exploring the Clown Prince of Crime is going to be out hopefully early next 2023. Next 2020, the next year, hopefully early next year.
How many
I'm sorry,
2023s
guys. I'm sorry, guys. It's midnight. I'm sorry, guys. It's midnight where I am. So, and I'm gonna close this off by asking you guys to plug whatever it is you got coming up next. Lou, let's start with you.
The Man Who Laughs. We just covered it.
Nothing else?
Go on.
Okay. Rich?
My next thing is I'm going to be writing for Star Trek Explorer magazine. Years ago, I used to write for the Star Trek magazine, so this will be a nice return to form. My career kind of veered away from magazine work for a while, and I'm very excited about that.
Bob?
I've got coming out later this year, Thrilling Adventure Yarns 2022, which is my tribute to the golden age of pulp magazines, with 28 stories from people like Paul Kupperberg and many, many other fine folk.
Paul Kupperberg.
Well, I'm currently working on Direct Conversations, Talks with Fellow DC Comics Bronze Age Creators, which is a book of interviews with a bunch of people who I came into the business with in the mid 1970s. The Kickstarter is going to be kickstarting this week, hopefully, and yeah, I'm very excited about it. It's got. I'm waiting to reveal who all I spoke to for this for the Kickstarter. But let's just say I've got a former DC Comics vice president and a producer of Batman movies, among others, in the book, which features an introduction by Mr. Robert Greenberger.
Paul, LaMar, anything you guys want to add other than continue to watch us on the Comics Cube?
Follow me on @PaulG_Cornish on Twitter to see what other trouble I can get into.
LaMar, take us home.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to plug or anything like that. I'm just looking forward to partaking in everything you guys got coming, because it sounds like some heavy hitter stuff. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. Looking forward to the book, and I promise I will turn mine in soon.
No problem.
And Lou and I are just really happy all of you are involved, and everybody else who was not able to make it to the call. This is going to be a great lineup, and I'm thrilled.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Awesome.